This should be brief. Welcome to 5POA Evolution, where I chronicle the history of one character in action figure form. February is the month of love, and so today I'm going to spotlight a female character I adore, Wonder Woman. First, a few parameters. Wonder Woman might be a character who appeals to both boys and girls, but this video is going to focus on action figures. I'm not going to be looking at items that we would traditionally consider to be dolls or other things targeted specifically at girls. I'm also not going to be looking at anything meant for little kids like Imaginex or things like that. Lastly, of course, I don't have every Wonder Woman ever made, but we will cover just enough of the highlights so that you can witness action figure evolution. While there were a few items produced by the Mego Corporation, our journey begins in 1984 with the Superpowers collection by Kenner. She stands 4 1/4 inches tall and technically has 7 points of articulation, but that neck joint is functionally useless. Notice the slant to her shoulder joints though? That's to accommodate her action feature. She also has T-style hips and single hinge knees. She also came with a lasso similar to this one, which I don't have. After all these years, the colors are still vibrant, and while she might stand short compared to her super friends, this Wonder Woman still stands tall as one of the most influential Wonder Woman figures ever made. In fact, in 1988 it was used as the base model for this Burger King Kids Meal cup holder. Without any points of articulation, it's not an action figure at all, but the influence from Superpowers was so striking I felt it bared bringing out. Obviously there are some notable differences, most especially in the face. Again though, it's worth a mention. Partly because of our next Wonder Woman, the 1990 DC Comics Superheroes version by Toy Biz. While most people seem to think that the molds for this were taken from Superpowers, I disagree. Standing them in a line, I think it was actually taken from the cup holder. The size is about the same, the facial and especially tiara details are the same, and they have the same overly thick arms. She also came with a lasso, this one to be exact. The Superpowers version of course had that bracelet defense pose. This one, however, can chuck her lasso at evildoers. Go on and tie yourself up! DC was so horrified by how cheap this line was that they took the license away from Toy Biz and gave it back to Kenner. Looking at this Wonder Woman, and it's easy to see why. It's hard to believe, but we wouldn't see a new action figure of Wonder Woman again until 1999. The figure was an early release from DC Direct. She stands at 6 inches tall, and in addition to the articulation that Superpowers had, has a single-jointed hinged elbow and swivel wrists. That wrist articulation would come in handy for her battle axe and shield. Though crudely painted, the shield is covered in stars, with that familiar double W in the axe. Given what a powerhouse DC Direct would become, it's interesting to see one of their inaugural offerings. I will say she is stuck kind of lilting to one side. Despite the joint, the elbow is pre-posed, so you can't actually straighten her arm. Additionally, the gold is really more of a dark brown, though when you look at the picture on the back, you get an idea of what could have been. The card art, by the way, was Wonder Woman specific and features some nice Themysciran architecture. It's interesting because Hasbro had a 6-inch DC superheroes line at the time with no Wonder Woman, and you could kind of fudge her in. She's a bit outdated, but still an important step in Wonder Woman's action figure journey. That journey would continue in 2000 with this JLA Wonder Woman by Hasbro. It's a direct market figure, which means it was only sold at comic book and specialty shops, and was meant to serve as a companion piece to the Total Justice series. These were highly detailed figures stuck in extreme poses, and while Wonder Woman does have that over-detailed quality, I just never really felt like she belonged. Maybe if everybody was standing up straight it would be different, but here she just seems too big. In 2001, a whole new generation was introduced to Wonder Woman thanks to the Justice League animated series. This then blossomed into Justice League Unlimited. Mattel gave us several animated versions of Wonder Woman. This one's the later edition, which featured extra articulation. As is often the case, that includes a neck joint that doesn't really do anything, swivel hinge arms, a swivel waist, and V-style hips. This Diana stands at 4 1/2 inches, making her ever so taller than the original Superpowers. Translating a 2-dimensional cartoon into a 3-dimensional action figure has its challenges, but I think Mattel did a really good job here. You can practically hear the voice of Susan Eisenberg just looking at it, although this particular one seems to be looking in 2 different directions. All the better to keep an eye on crime. Swinging back over to DC Direct, and while they had released released a few figures of Wonder Woman based on things like the Super Friends cartoon or her Golden Age appearance. For our purposes, the next major one I want to look at is this 2003 figure from their JLA series. Even after just a few short years, we can see a massive leap forward in quality from their first release. Looking at this face, and it really feels like Jose Luis Garcia Lopez artwork come to life. It also really puts me in mind of Alex Ross Wonder Woman artwork. The proportions are a lot more natural this time around, and while the gold is still a bit on the dark side, it is at least recognizably gold. Additionally, this figure benefits from having ball-jointed shoulders. The stars are nice and crisp, and there's some nice natural wrinkles in the boots. Overall, this is a very strong offering and is still one of my favorite Wonder Woman head sculpts. And then we have this one. This DC Direct Wonder Woman comes from Justice League New Frontier based on the artwork of the late Darwin Cook. Cook had a wonderful retro style that was great on paper, but I don't know if it was really well translated here. Kinda looks like Wonder Woman has conjunctivitis. Still, I love the larger, more powerful proportions on this figure, and it's one of the first times we saw Wonder Woman depicted as having a more battle-style skirt. Same with the dinged-up armored shin guards. That sheath on the side lets you know she came with a sword, but unfortunately I don't have it. I do, however, have her lasso of truth and her alternate armored head. Unfortunately, she must have sudden onset alopecia because a huge chunk of her hair came out while trying to swap the heads. Keep her name! Jokes about the face aside, this is a great figure that would portend the more armored Wonder Woman we've come to know and love, and as an action figure has a level of playability that we would later come to expect. In a lot of ways this figure was of its time, in other ways it was ahead of its time. Truly a new frontier indeed. The following year, in 2007, DC Direct would give us one of the most beloved and highly sought after Wonder Woman figures of all time. Affectionately called the Terry Dodson Wonder Woman, this is based on the Who is Wonder Woman comic. The proportions and the pose really feel like Dodson's artwork come to life. Great face sculpt, and the golds really pop. I especially appreciate the bit of red peeking out underneath the logo. These days, this figure can go upwards of $100 on the aftermarket, and it's not hard to see why. One of the best representations of one of the best heroes. What our next figure lacks in the Terry Dodson's form, it more than makes up for in function. This is the 2008 DC Universe Classics Wave 4 Wonder Woman by Mattel. The figure is well articulated with a head that actually turns, swivel hinge shoulders, bicep swivel, an ab crunch that allows her to arch back this far and hunch forward a little, swivel hinge hips that can kick outward, thigh cut, and hinged ankles. And that's in addition to the standard single elbow, wrist swivel, and single jointed knee bend. Technically there's a cut here, but I've never been able to get it to swivel. Not only that, but similar to the 1999 DC Direct release, this one comes with a battle axe and a shield. Unlike that more patriotic DC Direct one, this one is a simple gold with stars, but once again the axe blade is the Wonder Woman logo. She has the lasso, but it's sculpted on and non-removable. Even so, in terms of playability, this figure's a lot of fun and still really holds up. Some of the joint cuts do distract from the aesthetics, and while the face looks very nice straight on, DC Universe Classics had a reputation for the profiles being a bit flat. That said, if you want a 6-inch scale classic Wonder Woman figure that's a lot of fun and really articulated, this is going to be your best option. If, however, you want a 6-inch scale Wonder Woman that prizes aesthetics over functionality, then this is going to be your option. Here we have the 2009 DC Direct Justice League of America boxed set version. A single carded version had been released earlier in the year with different colors and also a different face sculpt, but most collectors agree that this is the superior version. In fact, there are a lot of collectors out there that swear by this as the superior Wonder Woman ever made. I did a whole video debating the best DC Direct Wonder Woman, so I'm not going to go that far into it here. Suffice it to say, I do really like the proportions on this one, but I especially like the colors. You have that brighter superpowers feel, but the gold has a metallic sheen and isn't just a Crayola yellow. She also scales very nicely with other 6-inch DC figures. In 2011, DC Direct would release its final classic comic book style single-carded Wonder Woman action figure. This was part of an assortment called Justice League Classic Icons. It reused older bodies, in this case the Alex Ross Justice Wonder Woman, and gave them new heads. Unlike previous figures, this one was cast in a flesh tone plastic instead of just being painted, giving it a much more natural feel. A taller figure, it clocks in at 7 inches, and has a decidedly darker color scheme. This time the gold is more brass. The figure also looks stronger and more powerful than most other Wonder Woman figures. Although the head sculpt is alright, I'll admit that it's not one of my favorites. But until McFarlane made his in 2023, this was your best bet for a classic style Wonder Woman to scale along with your DC Multiverse collection. And again, it was the final single-carded classic-style comic book Wonder Woman that DC Direct would ever make. And what a journey it was. So then, why was this the last? Well, for two reasons. For one thing, the company was going through an overhaul and rebranding itself as DC Collectibles. For another thing, DC Comics itself was going through an overhaul. The New 52. This was a company-wide reset, reimagining and redesigning all of their classic characters. But new designs meant new action figures, and Wonder Woman would never be the same. Instead of red, blue, and gold, her color scheme was now red, blue, and silver. The boots were now blue instead of red. The shorts were a heck of a lot less star-spangled, and lots of extra lines and seams were the order of the day for everyone. Articulation-wise, this is on par with the other DC Direct Wonder Woman we've looked at, though this one has bicep swivel. This Diana was offered as a single-carded release and also in several multi-packs. There were a few different heads, but I like this one the best, and although I did miss the gold, it was a fine update to a classic costume. Mattel made their own version, which I unfortunately never did get a hold of. For the next couple of years, DC Collectibles would boom. This includes an Earth 2 style Wonder Woman in 2014, and then another one based on the artwork of Jai Lee in 2015. Also in 2015, a whole new generation was introduced to Wonder Woman thanks to DC Superhero Girls. The series asked the question, what if My Little Pony, but DC? This Wonder Woman is just under 6 inches, and honestly is pretty unrecognizable as Wonder Woman. That said, as a property targeted for little girls, it's pretty cute. She's got the big Disney-like doe eyes, shoulder pads that would make the 80s blush, stars running down the sides of her pants in lieu of shorts or a battle skirt, and wings on the sides of her boots that put me more in mind of Artemis. The articulation's fairly basic, with a ball-jointed head, swivel-hinge shoulders, single-jointed swivel elbows, wrist swivel, swivel-hinge hips, single-jointed swivel knee, and boot cut. She does have a lasso. It plugs into her belt like so. In terms of reintroducing Wonder Woman to pop culture, however, this series was just the beginning. In 2016, Wonder Woman made her big screen debut played by Gal Gadot in Batman v Superman. A new Wonder Woman could only mean one thing: new toys. First and foremost, there was a basic line targeted for kids. These had simple sculpts and articulation. Just like the DC Superhero Girls version, she stands at just under 6 inches, and as basic caricatures for kids series go, doesn't look half bad. I mean, I can see it. The film design took advantage of the armored rebirth look that was taking the comics by storm. The gold was back, but here it looks more like brown mustard. We also get a battle skirt and some armored boots. As usual, not much movement in the neck, but she does have swivel shoulders, single-jointed swivel elbows, T-style swivel hips that just kick outward, and single-jointed hinge knee. Kinda hard to believe that the DC Superhero Girl version is more posable than the big screen adaptation. Additionally, her lasso is permanently affixed, but she does have a shield. I'm gonna be real with you, I have no idea what that symbol is, and she also has a sword. You can slide it through the belt if you want. Seriously, no one's gonna stop you. Fortunately, Mattel also made a higher-end one as part of their DC Comics Multiverse line. This one's not from Batman v Superman though, it's from the Wonder Woman standalone film. The body and accessories are the same as the BVS version, but this one has the better head sculpt. I do like the extra color in the cheeks. I also like the metallic paint for the armor and skirt. Nice texture in there too. The hands and bracers have more paint detail this time too, and articulation wise you can actually turn her head a bit. She's got swivel hinge shoulders that raise up pretty high, bicep swivel, the usual single jointed swivel elbow, wrist swivel, waist cut, swivel hinge legs that don't get much spread but it's better than nothing, thigh cut, single jointed knee, and ankle hinge. That belt loop lets you know that she has a sword, but unfortunately I've misplaced it. I do however have her shield, which is very impressive. I love all the lines and that bit of gold really stands out. It's also surprisingly big. Not only that, but see how her lasso's dangling? That's because you can actually unfasten this one. If only someone at Hasbro could have looked at this Wonder Woman when engineering Indiana Jones's whip strap. While Mattel had the mass market releases, there were plenty of other companies making Gal Gadot Wonder Woman figures. There were higher-end offerings like Mezco 112 Collective, as well as international options from brands such as Mafex or SH Figuarts. Mezco in particular would go on to make a couple of different comic versions. Even DC Collectibles was going to make one, but sadly it was cancelled, which is a shame because it looked really good. You might say this is one Gadot I'm still waiting for. The renewed popularity of Wonder Woman led to lots of new figures over at DC Collectibles, including a new version based on the artwork of Darwin Cook, one based on the art stylings of Greg Capullo, and a retro styles bombshell version based on the artwork of Aunt Lucia, and this Wonder Woman based on her appearance in the Amazovirus. This design bridges the gap between the New 52 and the current version of Rebirth. It has that red, blue, and silver color scheme from New 52, but the armored look that would become the standard. A 1/12 scaled series, this Wonder Woman stands at just 6 inches. This line was hyper-articulated and came chock full of accessories. In addition to all the points of articulation we've seen before, this Wonder Woman has double-jointed elbows and wrists that not only swivel but also hinge up and down. Moving to the middle, and she has a diaphragm joint and a reverse ab crunch. Using both together, and she can arch back this far and hunch forward this far. That diaphragm joint also gives her a bit of tilt and twist. Underneath the battle skirt, we can see she has ball-jointed hips. The kick is just incredible, and she can do a perfect split. No thigh cut, but the ball joint does allow her to have some twist in the hip, and then moving down, she has double-jointed knees, boot cut, and ankles that can hinge, and for the first time in a Wonder Woman figure, pivot. I prefer the gold and the Rebirth design we would eventually get, but this is a really nice stepping stone. The logo feels particularly vintage, and the shin guards remind me of the Darwin Cook figure we looked at. That said, I can't help but feel that the additional straps are kind of extraneous, and I don't really love the face. I actually much prefer the prototype that they have on the back of the box. Diana comes preloaded with fists, but also includes alternate accessory holding hands. One of those accessories is this really nice sword. The hilt is pretty cool with these nice eagle wings. She can hold it in either hand, but the grip is pretty loose. You could also store it in her belt loop. Speaking of hoops, she has another hook on the side of her belt. That's for storing this lasso. It hangs there like so. But that's not all. She also comes with this version. As you can see, it's really nice and pliant. Similar to the sword, though, she doesn't exactly grip it. On the subject of that hand, though, remember this big bulky strap? That's for a shield. Flipping it around, we see an indent where it plugs in. Assembled, it does look fairly realistic. With all of her accessories in use, this Wonder Woman's a very nice display piece. Flipping her around and you'll notice another one of those plugs. That's so that she can store the shield. They even put a ridge in her hair to accommodate it. This, however, was one of 2 Icons versions of Wonder Woman DC Collectibles would release that year. They also released this one as part of a Rebirth style box set. The Rebirth design would be the gold standard for the character moving forward, by which I mean the gold was back, we still had the armored look, but the battle skirt was a bit more refined. The boots, while new, still felt classic, and although they had a bit more detail, the bracers were more traditional. More so than the Amazovirus, this really felt like a modern update of the classic costume. Unlike the Amazovirus version, however, this was exclusive to a box set and didn't have any accessories whatsoever. Notice any other major differences? One of the biggest criticisms of DC Icons was that the figures were too small. With the box set, they began to correct course on that, the issue being that the newer figures were no longer compatible with the earlier releases. As great as the DC Icons line was, and it was great, I do think that was one of the things that did contribute to its downfall. Icons was scrapped, and in 2018 we got DC Essentials. I assume it was called Essentials because they essentially came with nothing. These figures were just under 7 inches tall, and the male characters all shared the same basic body. In 2019 we got a DC Essentials Wonder Woman, and she was a completely unique sculpt. This one maintains the Rebirth design, and I will say I do like this face better than the previous two. Articulation-wise, she lost the reverse ab crunch, but she gained thigh cut. Instead of boot cut, this one has ankle balls that can swivel, and of course she can also hinge and pivot. The downside is that the DC Essential ankle balls were notoriously loose and her feet are really tiny. As such, getting her to stand can be tricky. DC Essentials wasn't the only Rebirth-style Wonder Woman released in 2019, however. Mattel released one as part of their DC Comics Multiverse series. In an effort to compete with Marvel Legends, the brand got a bit of an overhaul. Gone were the hideous swivel hinge hips of old, now replaced with ball joints. Female characters now had diaphragm joints. The ankles could now pivot. The upgrade in quality from just a couple of years prior was obvious. This figure was part of the Super Luther Collect and Connect wave, and in addition to a hanging lasso, she also has an action lasso, a sword, and one alternate fist. It really does go to show show how far Mattel had come. If I'm being brutally honest though, I never really loved this figure. The face never really screamed Wonder Woman to me, and while the details of the costume were nice, overall it just kind of felt more like a cosplayer dressed as Wonder Woman than Wonder Woman herself. The timing of each one of these figures coming out in 2019 is noteworthy, however, because each would represent the final Wonder Woman by their respective company. After making DC toys since 2003, in 2019 Mattel's license expired. Additionally, due to the global chaos in 2020, DC Collectibles was shut down. The license for mass-market DC action figures would now go to two new companies. Moving forward, the kid-friendly offerings would be made by Spin Master. These figures are a 4-inch scale and have pretty simple sculpts and paint jobs. In addition to a neck joint that doesn't work, Wonder Woman has swivel hinge shoulders, single-jointed swivel elbow, ball-jointed hips, thigh cut, and single-jointed swivel knee. Pretty impressive amount of posability for such a tiny figure. More than anything else, this line focuses on playability, with each figure coming with mystery accessories. Overall, this line's a lot of fun and a great way of introducing kids to DC heroes. On the collector side of things is DC Multiverse by McFarlane Toys. 4 years later, and it's easy to forget that this line was instrumental to McFarlane Toys' comeback. This figure is based on Wonder Woman 1984. They also made another one based off of her golden armor. The likeness wasn't exactly perfect, but better than Mattel. A 1/10 scale line, this figure stands over 7 1/4 inches and features wonderfully sculpted metallic armor with a great attention to detail, phenomenal texturing in the battle skirt, and a whole new standard of articulation for mass-market DC releases. This includes dumbbell necks that not only allow for up and down, but also for tilt as well as side to side, swivel hinge shoulders, rotator cuffs allowing for additional up, down, and side to side, bicep swivel, double jointed elbows, and wrist balls that can swivel and hinge in any direction. These figures also have diaphragm joints and dumbbell waists. The arch back is fantastic, albeit a bit gappy, but as with most diaphragm joint figures, the hunch forward isn't really anything special. What is special is the added tilt, and of course twist. Below the battle skirt, McFarlane uses a ratchet system. This particular Diana can kick 90 degrees and get a really great split. Similar to DC Icons, there's also a twist. There is also double jointed knee, toe articulation, and similar to DC Essentials, they have ankle balls that can swivel, hinge, and like Wonder Woman into a whole new era of action figures, pivot. This figure was a solid start, but not without its issues. That diaphragm joint, for example, is very functional, but kinda looks like she was sawed in half. I've already mentioned the likeness. But the biggest complaint that most collectors had about this figure was her tree stump-like legs. A lot of early DC Multiverse figures had this issue, and because of it she was at a scale with a lot of other heroes. In terms of accessories, DC Multiverse figures come with trading cards and figure stands. Zooming in, you can see what I mean about that likeness. Zooming out though, and you can really appreciate what a good job they did on the costume. Otherwise, this Wonder Woman comes with a wound-up lasso that I actually do have. It hangs like so. She also has this fun action one. The next time we'd see a DC Multiverse Wonder Woman would be this one based on her appearance from the last night on Earth. This kind of figure would really prove to be one of McFarlane's strong suits. Alternate versions of beloved characters that we otherwise would probably never have gotten in action figure form. This one's noteworthy for her mohawk and braid, her tattered cloak, and her more extreme armor. I'm pretty sure she could deflect missiles with this bracer. With McFarlane not giving us a standard comic book Wonder Woman until late 2023, this was a lot of fans' go-to and was really a customizer's dream. Being part of a build-a-wave, she came with parts from the Last Night on Earth style Bane, but honestly that one didn't really interest me, so I sold those pieces off. For other collectors who weren't interested in Bane, they also released a single carded version with Dr. Fate's helmet. Although it would be a long time before we got a regular comic version, we didn't have to wait long till our next DC Multiverse Wonder Woman. This was also released in 2021 and is based off of her appearance from Dark Knight's Death Metal. In lieu of her typical tiara, she has a spiky crown and some gothy makeup, long blue hair, monstrous skulls for shoulder pads, and studded armor with boots that would make Kiss blush. Instead of a lasso or a sword, she comes with a chainsaw made out of her lasso, and overall is a pretty rockin' addition to the collection. A more divisive addition would come later in the the same year with this one designed by Todd McFarlane himself. My review at the time was pretty scathing. I focused on the overly blue-centric color scheme, the sloppy paint job, sections of the figure that were left untextured and unpainted, and design choices that just plain baffled me. It wasn't all bad though. I did give this figure its roses. I complimented the lovely face sculpt, the intricate sculpting of certain design elements, most especially the boots, and just how well articulated the figure was despite having only single-jointed swivel elbows. I also praised the accessories such as the ornately detailed shield and sword. Even so, looking back at that video, I feel like I was being needlessly harsh and critical, more to be funny than to be helpful, and if I could do things over again, I wouldn't have approached the video quite the way that I did. The figure has its fans, I'm just not one of them, but with time I have grown to appreciate it more. If nothing else, it's always a hit during head swaps. 2022 brought us the Frost King Build-A-Wave and with it the Endless Winter Wonder Woman. This design was taken from the comics and features a more bundled up Diana, wonderful fur sculpting in her animal pelt cape, and I'd love to see it with more metallic paint. Still, there is some fine detailing and a pretty nice face sculpt. In fact, McFarlane liked it so much that they later reissued it with the axe that she's holding in the promo image that the figure doesn't have. Next up for 2022 is Superwoman from the Target exclusive Crime Syndicate Starro Wave. Strictly speaking, this is not Wonder Woman, but I still feel like she's worth a mention. For one thing, while Superwoman is usually Lois Lane, this one is actually Diana's protege Donna Troy. She even has the bracers. Most importantly, she has body features that we're going to be looking at later in a different Diana, so consider this entry more setting the stage. Also in 2022 was a Walmart exclusive repaint of the one designed by Todd McFarlane. As much as I didn't like the original, I thought this was a huge improvement, most especially the balance between red and blue. Obviously, there were issues with certain areas not being painted well, but some changes did cover a few sins. Instead of gold, this time we had more of a brass. Those color changes also made it to the weapons. She was also given a new lasso, but unfortunately mine broke. In the absence of a proper Wonder Woman, this was a fair substitute, but that lack of proper Wonder Woman was really starting to feel unfair. Especially when the only other DC Multiverse Wonder Woman was another Walmart exclusive, an all-gold version of Dark Knight's Death Metal. This one is called Anti-Crisis Wonder Woman, and no, it's not just an action figure painted to look like an Oscar. She really did sport this look in the comic. Additionally, changes were made to the headpiece to get rid of the crown and give her a fuller head of hair. All of that was pretty cold comfort though, given that these were the only DC Multiverse Wonder Woman figures of 2022. Two of them were repaints, and one of them wasn't Wonder Woman at all. The yawning void in our collection where a comic book Wonder Woman should go was growing louder and louder. Fortunately, DC Multiverse wasn't McFarlane Toys' only DC line. He'd also resurrected the 1980s Superpowers collection. The new figure was a bit taller than the classic and combined elements of Rebirth and the original. She had the more modern breastplate, but the star-spangled shorts. Overall, this was a pretty solid addition. McFarlane even reissued it in classic Superpowers colors. Still, the fact that this was the first basic comic-style Wonder Woman McFarlane gave us was a bitter pill to swallow. Even 2023 began with a kind of sort of reissue. This one is based on Wonder Woman's cameo from Shazam! Fury of the Gods. The arms and torso are the same as 1984, as are the boots, but responding to the criticism, her thighs are new and much more powerful, and she was given a new head with a much better likeness. Overall, it's an improvement, and the new legs help the scaling issue. This edition includes the two lassos she previously came packed with, but they also made her tiara a separate accessory. Also, if you were worried about which finger I was using, no doubt to capitalize on the release of the Flash film, this year's Target exclusive Build-A-Wave was based on the Flashpoint comic. This Wonder Woman is an exceptionally well-sculpted representation of that look. I particularly get a kick out of the buzzsaw-like helmet. They did a great job texturing the undersuit. The bicep articulation is well hidden by the armband. The colors are clean and vibrant, and they did something very unique by hiding all of the articulation for the ankle inside of the boot. Even though you can't see it, it still swivels, and although not as deeply as usual, it can still hinge, but it can't really pivot. Additionally, the torso armor does hinder the articulation somewhat, but let's be honest, would you really want to break up the lines of this sculpt? She can't hunch forward, but really what DC Multiverse figure can, but arching back is no problem. While not as much as usual, she still can tilt, and most importantly, she can twist. It's not a version of Wonder Woman I was clamoring to have, but it's a very nice figure, and I'm happy we got it, but not even a tenth as happy as I am to finally get this one. After 4 years and over a dozen other variants, we finally have a classic DC Multiverse Wonder Woman. It should not have taken this long, but she's worth the wait. This figure was built on that Donna Troy Superwoman, hence why I brought it up earlier, as evidenced by the arms and also the legs. This figure is based off of her appearance in Who is Wonder Woman and has some really cool metallic paintwork and a host of accessories including a shield, a sword and an axe, her lasso of truth, and 4 alternate hands. The figure's not without its criticisms, with some being a little bit slow to warm on the face, the irksome dead spot in her star-spangled trunks, and boots needlessly breaking up her white stripe. Issues aside, for me, this is the ultimate pre-New 52 style Wonder Woman action figure, and how perfect is it that this Wonder Woman brings us full circle to where our journey started 40 years ago. In fact, McFarlane even released one in Superpowers colors, but it's a Platinum Edition chase figure and nearly impossible to get. Not without spending $90 to $100 on the aftermarket. As of this recording, we have no idea what the next Wonder Woman figure will be. Perhaps a McFarlane version of New 52, or maybe Rebirth. But what about the future? New designs, new toy companies. The one thing we do know is that whether it's Wonder Woman, action figures, or Evolution, they're always moving forward. Well, usually. For a more in-depth look at some of these figures, check out my brand new Wonder Woman playlist right here, or for another Evolution, check out this video. Thank you so much for watching. I'll be back again real soon, but until then, play nice and have fun.